His blood was still on my hands when I realized that this was just the beginning of a deep sadness, but one that was full of surprises. Good morning, my dears. My name is Jacqueline, but around here everyone calls me Grandma Jacques. I am 72 years old and I am here to tell a story that I have kept deep in my soul for almost 4 decades. Born and raised in Valenca, in the interior of Bahia, at a time when women had no voice or say. Today I live in Feira de Santana, where I rebuilt my life after everything I'm going to tell you. Before I start this story that I've never told anyone, I want to thank you for coming to this channel. If you're enjoying it, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next stories from this old lady. Tell me in the comments which part of Brazil you are watching me from. I can only imagine how many different corners this video will reach, and that warms my heart. I was born in 1951 in a small mud house in the interior of Bahia. My father Sebastião worked in the fields, planting cassava, corn, beans. My mother Raimunda washed clothes for the people of the city and made barrel lace that she sold at fairs. We were poor, but there was never a lack of food on the table, nor love in that house. I was raised with 5 other siblings, 3 boys, 3 girls. I was the second oldest. From an early age I learned to take care of the youngest, to cook, to clean. School, only until the 4th grade. After that, my father said that women don't need to read much, no. Just enough to not be cheated when shopping, unlike my brothers who studied as much as they wanted. The smell of my childhood was of cooking beans, wet earth after the rain and smoke from a wood stove. We woke up to the rooster crowing. We slept when the lamp went out. There was no electricity, no running water, water came from the well, bathing was done in a basin, a simple life, but I didn't know any other. I got my first period when I was 12 and my mother said, "Now you're a young woman, you have to be careful around men." He didn't explain anything else. I thought I was going to bleed to death because I was so scared. The explanations came from the older friends in whispers, full of shame and incomplete words. My father was strict, but he was never violent. He had that serious way of men of that time, who thought that showing affection was something for weak people. But I knew he loved us in his own twisted way. My mother was more affectionate, she hugged us, sang, told stories at night. Things started to change when I turned 16. Suddenly, the boys started looking at me differently at the fair, at church, at the São João festivities. I was thin, dark-haired, with long hair down to my waist. Nothing else. But in that small town, any new girl attracted attention. It was at São João in 1967 that I met João. He was from Cachoeira, a neighboring city. He had come with friends to the party, tall, strong. I worked in construction. He was 22 years old and had a smile that made me forget even my name. "Does the girl want to dance?" he asked, extending his hand as the forró music played. I looked at my father, who nodded discreetly. At that time, a decent girl didn't go alone, not even to the corner. Bonfire, accordion, the smell of roasted corn and mulled wine. I danced with João until the sweat ran down, until my feet hurt. When he brought me back to my family, I knew something had changed inside me. "Can I come visit you on Sunday?" he asked before leaving. That Sunday, João appeared at home dressed in his best clothes, with his hair combed, and a package of sweets for my mother. He talked to my father about work, about football, about life. He pleased my younger brothers with jokes and little pranks. Mom served coffee and he praised it as if it was the best thing he had ever tasted. The relationship began like this, with visits on Sundays, always supervised. João sat in the living room, I sat in the chair next to him, respectful distance, formal conversation. Sometimes he would bring a simple gift, a hair ribbon, a fruit that we didn't have around, a little notebook for me to write in. "Jacqueline, this guy seems nice." My dad commented after a few months, "But take it easy. A man promises a lot before he wants it and then changes his mind." I should have listened to my father more carefully. In the first 6 months, João was attentive, patient, respectful. He talked about his dreams. He wanted to be a construction foreman one day, have his own house, start a family. He told me about his father, Daltro, a widower for many years, a respected man in their community, owner of a small store. "My father raised 3 sons alone," João said proudly. "Never wanted to get married again. He said that no woman could replace my mother." I thought this respect for the mother's memory was beautiful. Little did I know what this story hid. I met Daltro the day Zhao took me to introduce me to his family. It was Sunday. I had made a corn cake to please. Daltro was an imposing man, taller than Zhao, with grey hair and large, calloused hands. He had that penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through you. "So, this is the girl who's been occupying my son's mind," he said, looking me up and down. I felt a shiver. It wasn't the look of a father-in-law getting to know his daughter-in-law, it was the look of a man evaluating merchandise. I lowered my eyes as I had been taught a decent girl did. Now I know I should have trusted my instincts and run from there. The visit was strange. Daltro asked many questions. If I knew how to cook, clean, sew, if I was a respectable young woman, if I intended to have many children. Zhao was embarrassed, but he didn't argue with his father. His brother seemed used to that behavior, almost bored. "Dad, she's a good girl." Zhao tried to intervene at one point. "Comes from a right-wing family. I'm just getting to know who's going to join the family." Dro replied dryly. "A woman has to know her place from the beginning." I went home feeling restless, but I didn't say anything to my parents. I thought it was just the way an older man from that old creation did. How stupid of me. The relationship continued and Zhao asked for my hand a year later. I was 17 when we got engaged. He 23. The engagement was simple. A small party at my house with a cake made by my mother, soda divided into many glasses, all the neighbors present. My parents gave the small savings they had to help with the layette. Zhao had already managed to rent a small house in Valenka, just 2 rooms, but it was the beginning of our dream. I got married in January 1969, I had just turned 18. Simple white dress that my mother and aunts sewed, a dress borrowed from a cousin, a bouquet of wild flowers picked on the morning of the wedding. The ceremony was in the town's small but crowded church. In a small town, a wedding is an event for everyone. Daltro appeared with the other 2 sons. Throughout the ceremony, I felt his gaze on me, as if he were evaluating whether I was worthy of his son. There was no smile, no nod of approval, just that cold, calculating gaze. At the party after the ceremony, he drank more than everyone else. He wasn't so drunk he was falling over, he was just the kind of talkative drunk who says what he really thinks. At one point he approached me and Zhao. "Now you have responsibility, young man," he said, squeezing his son's shoulder tightly. "A woman is like an animal, she needs a short rein from the beginning, if she doesn't take control." John laughed awkwardly. I pretended not to hear, as women of that time were trained to do. I swallowed those words along with the wedding cake. Nushasia's night was like many others of that time. Scary, painful, full of ignorance on both sides. John was not purposefully cruel, but he also did not know what to do beyond what he heard from other men. I didn't know anything other than the lie down and bear it that older women whispered to brides. I woke up the next day as a wife, a married woman, a housewife. The life ahead of me seemed to be mapped out. Taking care of the house, the husband, having children, repeating the cycle that I saw in all the women around me. The first few months were spent adapting. Zhao worked from Monday to Saturday, he left before sunrise and returned when it was already dark. I took care of the house, cooked the food, washed the clothes, sometimes did embroidery to sell and help with the income, but Zhao didn't like it very much. He said it seemed like he couldn't support the household. Once a month, we would visit Daltro. Those visits were always tense for me. He examined his son's house with a critical eye, running his finger over the furniture, looking for dust, checking the pots and pans to see if they were well ventilated. "A woman is known by the kitchen she keeps," he said, as if I wasn't there. When Zhao wasn't around, Daltro would make comments that made me uncomfortable. A good wife would have already given me a grandson to hold. Or she's too thin like that. Man likes meat to grab. I swallowed it all in silence. He was my husband's father. He deserved respect. That's what I had been taught. Besides, I was afraid of him. Fear of that look, of those big hands, of that authority he imposed. Things started to get weird when I got pregnant. At the end of 1969, Zhao was overjoyed. He treated me like I was made of glass. When Dro found out he came to visit, something he never did. Always expected us to come to him. "Now you are a complete woman," he said, looking at my still flat belly. "I hope it's a boy. There are already too many women in this world." The pregnancy was difficult. Constant nausea, weakness, pain that came and went. The city doctor said it was normal, that I was very young and my body was adapting. John was worried, but he needed to work. I spent most of those months alone, dealing with the discomfort as best I could. Daltro started to appear more. He brought things for the baby, a wooden crib that he made himself, clothes that he had saved from his children, a rocking horse in case it was a boy, always when Zhao wasn't there, always with that look that bothered me. "Pregnant girl needs care," he said. "My son works a lot, he can't always be here." On one of these visits, in the 5th month of pregnancy, he brought a bottle of homemade wine. To give strength, he insisted when I refused. "Pregnant woman needs strong blood." I accepted a small glass so as not to seem ungrateful. The taste was strange, too strong. 2 hours later, I started to feel intense pain, bleeding. "Doctor," I screamed for help until a neighbor heard. I lost the baby that night. The doctor said that it happens, that many women lose their first one. No one questioned the wine, not even myself at the time. It was only years later, looking back, that the pieces fell into place. John was devastated, but he recovered quickly, the way men do. "Let's try again," he said. "God knows what he is doing." Daltro came to the baby's funeral with a solemn expression, but his eyes showed no sadness. There was almost relief. It was after this that I noticed the change in John. It started slowly. It involved small criticisms, such as the seasoning of the food, the tidiness of the house. He started drinking more and arriving home later. At first there were comments, then came the screams. The first slap came when I asked where he had spent the night, hard in the face, throwing me against the wall. "My woman, don't question me," he said through gritted teeth. "Learn your place." I cried all night in the bathroom, with a cloth over my mouth so he would not hear. In the morning, John acted as if nothing had happened. I also pretended like so many women before me. That slap opened the door for others. Soon came shoving, then punching, always when he had too much to drink, always followed by regret the next morning, flowers picked along the way, promises of never again, rare little tears that convinced me that he really was sorry and I forgave him, because that was what women did, because there was nowhere else to go. My parents had died in a car accident 6 months after my wedding, because I believed that love was just that, with good and bad parts. Dalro knew. I'm sure I knew. During visits, I would look at my poorly disguised bruises, with long clothes, even in the heat, with the thick rice powder I used to cover the marks. "A woman has to know how to please her husband," he commented, smiling from the corner of his mouth. "When you don't like it, you use concealer." In 1972, I became pregnant again. This time, Zhao cut down on drinking. The attacks stopped temporarily. Dro kept his distance during those months, which brought me relief. The pregnancy was calmer than the first, and in October of that year our daughter Mariana was born. Beautiful, perfect, with my father's eyes and my dark hair. Zhao was disappointed that it wasn't a boy, but he soon fell in love with his daughter. "Dallas already holds her granddaughter when we take her to meet her." "Girl, it's just work," he said, barely glancing at the baby. "It's a mouth to feed that doesn't bring anything in return." With Mariana I found new strength. She no longer allowed Zhao to hit me in front of her, even when I was just a baby. He respected this, took his outbursts to another room, but they kept happening. Our life continued like this for another 2 years. Zhao working, drinking, alternating between being a loving husband and an abusive husband. I was taking care of the house, the daughter, trying to be invisible when I felt the storm coming. Dro visiting us monthly, always with those looks, those comments, that way that made me want to lock all the doors. It was in 1974 that everything changed forever. Zhao had just turned 29, I was 23, Mariana was almost 2. It was a Friday like any other. Zhao left for work in the morning, promising to arrive early to take Mariana to see the fireworks at the city festival. The day passed, night fell, nothing from Zhao was unusual. He often left work straight to the bar, but he had promised his daughter, who was waiting anxiously, dressed for the party. When the clock struck 9 p.m., I put Mariana to bed, promising that her father would take her to see fireworks the next day. She fell asleep crying. At midnight there was a knock at the door. It was Zhao's friend, Diao, pale face, hands shaking. "Jacqueline, something happened. An accident occurred at the construction site." Diao's words seemed to come from far away, as if he was speaking underwater. "One and broke me," John fell from the third floor. My world collapsed at that moment. I don't remember exactly how I got to the hospital. I know that a neighbor stayed with Mariana. I know I cried the whole way in Tiao's truck, praying every prayer I knew. But when I got there, Jiao had already left. He didn't stand a chance, the doctors said. Instant death. She didn't suffer, as if that were any consolation for a 23-year-old widow with a young daughter. I looked at that body covered with a white sheet and I didn't recognize the man with whom I shared 5 years of my life. The face was different, deformed by the fall, but the hands were the same. Hands that caressed me and also hurt me so many times. I cried for everything, for Jiao who I met at the Sao Jiao festival, for the loving father he could sometimes be, even for the aggressor who regretted it in the morning. I cried for the future we wouldn't have, for the promises he made on good days, that everything would get better. In the days that followed, I lived in a state of shock. The burial was quick. We didn't have money for anything elaborate. Daltro organized everything, paid the expenses. He seemed too controlled, as if he were burying a stranger, not his own son. Life goes on, he said at the cemetery as the casket was lowered into the ground. You and the girl can count on me. At that moment, his words seemed gentle. A safe haven when I was drowning. Little did he know what that offer really meant. I returned home with Mariana to the deafening silence, to the corners that still held Jiao's scent, to his clothes on the clothesline that I had washed the day before. Life had been hard with him, but at least I wasn't alone. Now it was just me and my daughter in the world. I didn't have a job, I didn't have any money saved. Jiao never allowed me to work outside the home and the little I earned from embroidery was barely enough to buy materials to make more. The rent was due in a week and the landlord had already come to offer his condolences and remind him that business is business. That's when Daltro appeared with a proposal. Come live with me, he said, sitting in my living room. 3 days after the burial. The house is big, there's a spare room since the boys left. Mariana will be in a better condition than in this place. I hesitated. Something about the offer made me uncomfortable, the same shiver I felt when I first met him. But what else could I do? Return to Valenka? I had no family there anymore, no close friends after being away for so long. It would just be until I got a job, settled down. Of course. He responded too quickly. Just until you recover from that BAC. A week later, Mariana and I moved to Daltro's house. It was located in a small place far from the city, isolated, surrounded by cassava fields. The house was simple but spacious. 3 bedrooms, large living room, kitchen with wood stove, large yard with chickens and a dairy cow. The warehouse he managed was at the front of the land, facing the main road. The first few days were calm. Daltro would leave early for the warehouse, return for the lunch I prepared, then return to work until nightfall. He was polite and kept a respectful distance. He spent little time with his granddaughter, but he did not show the aversion he had shown in their first encounters. I kept the house in order, cooked, washed, ironed. Mariana played in the backyard, enchanted by the animals, by the space she had never had before. Little by little, the pain of loss gave way to routine, the need to move on. I started looking for work. I asked the warehouse customers, offered sewing and embroidery services. It wasn't much, but I started to save up some change hidden in a biscuit tin, saving up for our new start. The changes in Daltro began in the first month, subtle at first, a lingering look during dinner, a strange compliment about how the dress marked my body, questions about when was the last time Jiao and I had slept together. A young woman like you must be missed, he said one night after Mariana was already asleep. I pretended not to understand. I thanked him for dinner and retired to my room, locking the door as I had become accustomed to. The discomfort grew, but I kept telling myself that it was all in my head, that I was misinterpreting it because of grief, because of the fear of being alone. The first time he tried something more direct was when we had completed 2 months in that house. Mariana had a fever, and had spent the night awake with her. In the morning, Daltro offered to go to the city to get some medicine. Lie down for a while, he said when he returned. I'll watch the girl while you rest. Exhausted? I accepted. I fell asleep almost instantly in my room. I woke up with the mattress sinking next to me, a weight on me. Dalro shirtless, his morning breath of kashika invading my face. Quiet, he whispered, one hand covering my mouth. Don't you want to wake the girl? I fought. With all the strength I had. I struggled, bit, and scratched. For a moment, surprise gave me the upper hand. I managed to push him away, run to Mariana's room, and lock the door. He didn't insist that day. He stayed on the other side of the door. He was breathing heavily. It was just a misunderstanding, he finally said, there's no need to make such a big deal. I spent the afternoon locked up with Mariana, terrified. When he left for the warehouse, I took the opportunity to get water, food, and whatever we needed to spend the night holed up in the room. At night he knocked on the door. His voice was calm, as if nothing had happened. Jacqueline, don't be silly. Let's talk like adults. It was an impulse. Won't it happen again? I didn't answer. Mariana was sleeping in my arms, her fever finally breaking. I prayed for daylight to come soon, so that I would have a chance to escape from there. At dawn, the door opened. I had forgotten that he kept copies of all the keys. I woke up to him already inside the room, approaching the bed where I and Mariana, we were sleeping. If you shout, if you make any noise, you will scare the girl. He warned, his voice strangely controlled. Come with me to the other room. Let's settle this like grown-ups. I looked at my sleeping daughter. The fear of waking her, of traumatizing her, was greater than my own terror. I got up silently and followed him to his room. What happened that night I don't have the courage to detail even after so many decades. I can only say that it was the beginning of a nightmare that would last weeks, that I returned to my daughter's side, feeling that I would never be the same again, that part of me had died in that room. In the morning, Daltro acted as if nothing had happened. He had coffee, went to the store, came back for lunch. The only difference was the smile of satisfaction, the look of someone who had proven that he could do whatever he wanted. This will be our secret, he said when we were alone. No one would believe you anyway. The daughter-in-law who came to live with her father-in-law and now accuses him. Everyone will think it's a ploy to get the house, the property. And he was right. Who would believe it? A young widow, without resources, against an established man, respected in the community, even if they believed it. What would become of Mariana and me? Where would we go? I started locking the bedroom door with a chair, a table, anything I could find. But he always found a way. He always had the perfect excuse for Mariana, for the neighbors, for anyone who asked about the night noises, about my swollen eyes from crying so much. Mom is sad because she misses Dad. He would say to Mariana when she asked why I cried so much. I tried to run away twice. The first time, he found me on the road, Mariana in his arms, our little bundle of clothes on his back. He brought me back by force, the girl crying without understanding. He tries again and the girl stays with me. He threatened me when we were alone. I can handle it in court. I have friends. I have money for a lawyer. You have nothing. The second time I managed to get to the bus stop. I was getting on the bus to Salvador when he showed up with the city police chief. This is my daughter-in-law, he explained to the man. She hasn't been right in the head since my son died. She's trying to take my granddaughter away. Poor thing. The police chief, who had been Daltro's priest for years, looked at me with pity. I'd better go home, the child needs stability. That's when I understood that there was no way out, that no one would help me, that the nightmare would only end when he wanted it to. In the third week of that hell, Daltro drank more kashika than usual. The harvest had been good, the store was prospering. He celebrated alone while I put Mariana to bed. When he came into my room that night, he was more violent than usual. He wasn't content with the usual abuse. He wanted to hurt, humiliate, leave marks. He hit me hard when I tried to resist, threw me against the wall, dragged me by my hair. Just like Jao's mother, she whispered as she attacked me. She had also played hard to get at first. The revelation shocked me even in the midst of the pain. Jao's mother, whom he said he respected so much, who he said was irreplaceable, had gone through the same hell. For the first time I couldn't hold back my screams. The pain was too strong, the despair too immense. Mariana woke up and came to the door calling. Mommy. Is Mommy sick? Go away, girl. Daltro shouted. Go back to the room. I heard her little footsteps running, scared. That awakened something in me, a fury I didn't know existed. My daughter wouldn't grow up seeing her mother being destroyed like that. She wouldn't live thinking that this was normal. In the rush of anger, I managed to break free. I ran to the kitchen right behind her, stumbling in my own drunkenness. I grabbed the first thing I could find, an iron pan still warm from dinner. When he reached me, swinging it, smiling that horrible smile, I spun with all my strength. The pan hit the side of his head with a sound I'll never forget. Daltro fell first on her knees, then on her side. She didn't move anymore. I stood still, the pan still in my hand, looking at the blood that was beginning to spread across the cement floor. I felt nothing, no remorse, no relief, no fear, just emptiness. Mariana appeared at the kitchen door, her eyes wide. "Grandpa, are you sick too?" I dropped the pan, ran to her, and covered her eyes. "Grandpa's asleep, my love. Let's go to your room. Mom will pack things and we'll go on a trip." I put her to bed, talking about the adventure we would have, about the big city we would see. As she fell asleep again, my mind was racing. What to do now? I went back to the kitchen. Daltro remained motionless, the blood forming an ever-growing pool. I grabbed his wrist, nothing on his neck, no sign of life. He had killed my father-in-law, the man who had abused me for weeks, the man who now realized had probably done the same to Zhao's mother years ago, the man who was respected by everyone, whom no one ever questioned. I couldn't call the police. Who would believe my version? A widow who kills her father-in-law who gave her shelter. They would arrest me, perhaps forever. What would become of Mariana? It was then that I made the decision that would change our lives forever. I dragged Daltro's body to the backyard, to the pigsty, where he raised 2 pigs, large, hungry animals, which he fed with scraps. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not to him, but to some greater force that could hear me. There was no other way. I threw the body over the makeshift fence. The pigs approached, curious at first. Then I looked away, but didn't move. I needed to be sure. I went back inside, washed the kitchen like I had never washed it before. I scrubbed the floor, the walls, everything that could have a drop of blood on it. I burned my stained clothes, showered until my skin burned. I packed a small suitcase with our most important things. I took the money I found in the house, not a lot, but enough to start over somewhere else. I woke up, Mariana, when the first ray of sunlight appeared. "Let's travel now, my love. Let's see new places." "And Grandpa?" "Grandpa stayed to take care of the house. We'll send a letter later." We went to the highway. We waited for the first bus. Salvador was the most logical destination, a big city, where no one would know us, where we could disappear. As the bus moved away from that place, I looked out the window one last time. The house grew smaller and smaller in the distance, the warehouse, the backyard where I buried not only my father-in-law's body, but also part of my soul. Mariana slept on my lap during the trip, innocent, without understanding what we had left behind. I stayed awake, eyes open, but not seeing the landscape that passed by. I could only see the blood, Daltro's glassy eyes, the pan in my hand. What I had done haunted me, but I did not regret it. I had protected my daughter, I had survived, and now, for the first time since Zhao's death, I had control of my life. Again. The bus was heading to Salvador and I was heading towards an uncertain future, but at least it would be a future that I would choose for myself. I carried with me the weight of what I had done, but also the determination to never be a victim again. What I didn't know was that Salvador held its own challenges, that the journey to rebuild my life was just beginning, and that Daltro's ghost would follow me for much longer than I imagined. We arrived in Salvador on a sultry late afternoon in 1974. The bus station was bustling with people, noise, and strange smells for someone coming from the countryside. Mariana, clinging to my neck, frightened by so much movement. I was with our small suitcase, less than 100 cruceros in my pocket and my heart heavy with what I had left behind. "Where are we going to sleep, Mommy?" Mariana asked, her eyes tired from the 6-hour trip. Good question. I didn't know anyone in the city, I hadn't planned anything other than escaping. In my head, the important thing was to get out of that hell. The rest would take care of itself. A lady who traveled next to us on the bus, Dona Dalva, with grey hair and a kind face, must have noticed my desperation. "The girl has somewhere to stay." I shook my head, holding back tears. I was exhausted, terrified, and lost. "I know a cheap boarding house in Pellerin-Ho. It's not luxurious, but it's clean. The owner is a good person. Maybe she'll give a discount for those who come with children." We followed Dona Dalva on a crowded city bus, then up the steep slopes of the historic center. Pellerinho frightened and amazed me at the same time. Colorful mansions, some majestic, others falling apart. Music coming from everywhere, people on the sidewalks, in the windows, on the corners, so different from the quiet country town I knew. The boarding house was in an old two-story house, with peeling walls and a wooden staircase that creaked with every step. Dona Zoled, the owner, had a face marked by time and a look that seemed to see beyond appearances. Running away from her husband, my daughter, she asked when we were alone. From my father-in-law, I replied before thinking, immediately regretting the confession. She felt it without asking for details, very common, more than people imagine or want to admit. The room was tiny, a single bed, a mattress on the floor, a closet that didn't close properly, but it had a window that caught the sea breeze and it was clean. To someone carrying the weight I carried, it looked like a palace. The first few days were spent adapting. Salvador was a world apart. The constant heat, the humidity, the fast pace, the different language that I sometimes barely understood. Mariana adapted more quickly, fascinated by the colors, the sounds, the movement. Dona Zolide helped me find work in a sewing factory in Commerce. It paid little, but at least it was a formal contract. I would get up at 5 in the morning, leave Mariana with Mrs. Zolide, who charged a pittance to look after her, and take 2 buses to the factory. The work was exhausting, 10, sometimes 12 hours bent over the sewing machine, always making the same movements, listening to the deafening noise of the machines, breathing in the fabric dust that covered everything. He returned at night, his body aching, his fingers pricked by needles, his eyes burning. Mariana was already sleeping when I arrived. On the weekends I tried to make up for it by taking her for walks on the beach. At the Barra Lighthouse, in places that cost nothing more than the bus fare. "You are very reserved," Dona Zole commented one Sunday, as she watched me braid Mariana's hair. "He never talks about the past, about his family." "I don't have any family," I replied simply, "just me and her." Life continued in a precarious routine, but at least we were safe. Or so I thought until the 3rd month in Salvador. It was a muggy Sunday in October. We were returning from the beach, Mariana skipping ahead of me when I saw the newspaper on the newsstand. I didn't used to buy. Every penny counted, but the headline paralyzed me. "Farmer missing, police suspect murder." The photo of Daltro, serious, looking straight at the camera, took up half the page. I took the newspaper with trembling hands, ignoring the vendor, complaining that a newspaper is not a magazine to be read for free. The report said the community was shocked by the disappearance of the respected businessman, with police investigating suspected murder after bloodstains were found in the kitchen. And worse, it spoke of the mysterious escape of the daughter-in-law and granddaughter shortly after the disappearance. "The police are looking for Jacqueline Ferreira dos Santos to provide clarification," said the last paragraph. I dropped the newspaper, picked Mariana up and ran back to the guest house, my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. "I need to get out of here," I said to Mrs. Zolide as soon as I entered. "Today? Now? What happened, girl? It's like you saw a ghost." I couldn't tell you. Even to that lady who had been so good, I couldn't reveal what I had done. "My father-in-law, he found me. He's going to take me back." It wasn't a complete lie. If they found me, I would be taken back, but to jail, not to his house. Dona Zolide didn't ask any more questions. She helped pack our small suitcase, gave us a few extra bucks for the work of taking care of Mariana. "Where are you going now?" "I don't know. Another state, maybe, without new documents, they'll find you wherever you go. I know someone who can help, but it's hard." Almost all the money I had saved in the 3 months went to pay someone Dona Zolide knew. A hunched man, smelling of cigarettes and liquor, who showed up at the boarding house in the dead of night, with forged documents. "Now you are Maria de Lourdes Silva," he said, handing over the brand new birth certificate and identity card. "And the girl is Ana Lucia. Remember the names. Never answer for the old one again, not even when you are alone." I resigned from the factory the next day. I would lose my severance pay, but I couldn't risk it. We left the pillory, the kind Mrs. Zolide, the life I had barely begun to build. We went to the other side of the city, Itapuan, where we rented a small room in the back of a family of fishermen's house. The following months were filled with constant paranoia. Every police car, every man who stared at me for a long time, every question about my past made me freeze with fear. I slept badly, ate little, and lost so much weight that my ribs showed. I found work as a maid in a family home in Rio Vermelho. They paid less than the factory, but I could take Mariana with me. The boss, Mrs. Elsa, was a demanding woman, more fair. Her husband, Dr. Ricardo, a renowned doctor, barely showed up at home. Home? What home? We no longer had a real home. The small room we rented was just a place to sleep. We spent our days at Dona Elsa's house, me cleaning, cooking, washing, while Mariana played in the backyard. We would come back late, fall exhausted into the bed we shared, only to wake up before the sun and start all over again. It was like that for almost a year. The fear gradually diminished, giving way to physical exhaustion, to emotional emptiness. I had escaped hell with Daltro, but what kind of life was this that I could offer my daughter? Mariana turned 4 in May 1975. I had no money for a present, for a party. I bought a Brigadier roll at the bakery, put a makeshift candle in it. We sang happy birthday, just the two of us, in the stuffy little room. I wanted a doll, Mommy. She asked with those eyes that reminded me so much of Jao. Next birthday, daughter. Mommy promises. Life went on like this for a few more months, until in September, what I had feared so much happened. I was at the market with Mariana, buying the little that our money allowed when I saw the poster pinned to the bulletin board. My face, a hand-drawn drawing, but recognizable, wanted for murder in bold letters and a reward for information. The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. The bag of beans I was holding fell, scattering grains across the cement floor. Miss, are you feeling sick? The store owner asked, approaching. I didn't answer. I picked Mariana up and left as quickly as I could, without looking back. I didn't go back to the little room in Itapuan, nor to Dona Elsa's house. I walked aimlessly through the city, Mariana complaining of tiredness, hunger, without understanding what was happening. We're playing hide and seek, daughter, I explained, swallowing my despair. We can't let anyone find us. At the end of the day, when we couldn't walk any longer, we ended up in a shopping square. Mariana slept on my lap. I stood there looking at the ships in All Saints Bay, thinking I could board one of them, run away, start over. But how? No money, no documents that you could show without fear with a small child? Where would it go? How long until they find me again? It was then that I made a decision that was as painful as it was necessary. It couldn't go on like this. He needed to face what he had done, assume the consequences for the sake of Mariana, who deserved more than a life of escapes and lies. The next morning I washed our faces in a public fountain and straightened our clothes as best I could. I bought a loaf of bread with the last money I had. We're going to visit an important person, I said to Mariana, who was eating her piece of bread with the voracity of someone who hadn't had dinner the night before. We walked to the central police station. Each step heavier than the last, as if I were heading towards my own execution. In a way, it was. Can I help you? The police officer at the front desk asked, eyeing my disheveled appearance suspiciously. I'm Jacqueline Ferreira dos Santos, I said, my voice almost fading. They're looking for me because of Daltro Santos' disappearance. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Within minutes I was surrounded by police officers, separated from Mariana, who was screaming for me, handcuffed like a dangerous criminal. The interrogation lasted for hours. I told everything. Since Jao's death, the move to Daltro's house, the constant abuse, the fatal night. Do you have evidence of these alleged abuses? Asked the delegate. A middle-aged man with tired eyes, from whom he has heard every possible story. What evidence could I have? No witnesses, no marks, just your word. Against the reputation of a respected man in the community. It was exactly as Daltro had said it would be. No one would believe it. That night, I slept in a cell with 3 other women. I didn't know where Mariana was, if she was scared, if she had eaten, if she was calling for me. The despair was so great that I vomited the little food they gave me. The next day, more interrogation, more disbelief in my words, more accusations. Pigs on the property were culled, a younger police officer said. We found no human remains. Where is the body? I told the truth. I threw it in the pigsty. No body, no crime, commented the police chief. But we have the blood in the kitchen and his escape. That's enough to keep her in jail until trial. Those were the worst days of my life. Worse than Daltro's abuse, worse than Jao's aggression, because now I didn't even have the comfort of seeing my daughter, of knowing that she was okay. A week later, I received the first visit. A social worker, a serious woman with thick glasses and a clipboard always at hand. "Your daughter is in temporary shelter," she informed. "Okay, getting settled into the routine. When can I see her?" "That depends on how things are going." "What if she wants to see you? Like this?" "If she wants, she is 4 years old." We explain the situation in an age-appropriate way, that the mother did something wrong and needs to be separated for a while. My world collapsed even further. Mariana, thinking that I had done something wrong, that I had abandoned her. It was too much. A month passed without news, then 2. No lawyer, no hearing, no movement, just the limbo of the overcrowded cell, the inedible food, the constant fear. That was when I met Helena, my new cellmate, a strong, determined woman who never looked down at the guards. She was there for theft. I would only serve 3 months. "Girl, you're wasting away," she commented on the 3rd day, noting how I barely touched my food. "This way, he won't even last until the trial." I told my story to Helena. I had nothing to lose. To my surprise, she believed it. More than that, she was outraged. "What they did to you is a crime, woman. There is an NGO that helps women like you. When I get out of here, I'll look for them." I didn't really believe it. Empty promises were common in prison. Everyone said they would help when they got out, but Helena did as she was told. 2 weeks after his release, I received a visit from a lawyer, an angelic, black woman, with afro hair, and a determined look. She represented a group defending women who were victims of violence. "Your story is more common than you think," she said after hearing my full account. "And we will fight for you." With Angelica, things started to change. First he got permission for me to see Mariana. The encounter was devastating. My thin daughter, short-cut hair, suspicious look, as if she didn't recognize me. "Did you make Grandpa sick?" she said when we were alone in the living room. "No, daughter, Grandpa was doing bad things to Mommy, hurting me a lot. How can I explain sexual abuse to a 4-year-old child? How can I justify what I had done?" Angelica also managed to have me transferred to the infirmary. I was severely anemic, dehydrated, and showing signs of deep depression. It was in the infirmary that I received the worst possible news. "Your husband's brothers filed a request for permanent custody of Mariana," Angelica informed them on a rainy afternoon in February 1976. "They claim that you are mentally unstable, that you made up the accusations against Daltro. They know what happened, they know what he was like. Without proof, your word is against theirs. And they have financial stability, a structured home, in the eyes of the law. They can't take my daughter away. But they could and did." The judge granted temporary custody to Renato, Jao's older brother. That same day, he took Mariana back to the countryside, far from me, without even allowing me to say goodbye. That was my rock bottom, the moment when I lost all hope, all will to continue. The night I found out they had taken my daughter, I tried to end my life. I saved the pills they gave me in the infirmary, gathered several, and swallowed them all at once. It didn't work. A nurse noticed and called for help. They pumped my stomach and tied me to the bed so I wouldn't try again. I spent weeks in that state, unable to speak, unable to eat properly, and with no will to live. The only thing that kept me breathing was the distant, almost impossible thought of one day seeing Mariana again. That was when Sister Conseco, an elderly nun, visited me in the prison infirmary, bringing spiritual comfort. She had deep wrinkles around her kind eyes and calloused hands from someone who had worked all her life. "God does not abandon his daughters," she would say, holding my hands in hers. "Even in the darkest valley, he walks by your side." I didn't really believe that God would allow all that. Jao's death, the abuse, the separation from Mariana. But Sister Conseco didn't give up on me. She came every day, she read passages from the Bible, only talking when I didn't want to hear the scriptures. Little by little, her constant presence was like a shy light, entering a dark cave. "You need to stay strong," she insisted. To fight for her daughter when she got out of here, when she didn't know if that little word made a difference. I started to eat better, to respond to the treatment, to believe that maybe, just maybe there was a tomorrow beyond those walls. In April 1976, I finally had my first hearing. Angelica had worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, witnesses. Helena showed up to confirm my condition when I arrived at the police station. Dona Zolide came from far away to testify about my frightened arrival in Salvador, with visible signs of violence. The great stroke of luck was when they found a former employee of Daltro's who confirmed the suspicions about Jao's mother's death years before. It wasn't a fever, as he said, she said in her testimony. It was he who beat her until she couldn't get up anymore. Even so, it was a difficult case, without a body, with my confession under questionable circumstances, with my attempt to escape. The trial dragged on for months. Documents, expert reports, and statements were sent and received. I was detained the entire time, now in a regular cell again, but at least I was receiving regular medical treatment. In January 1977, almost 3 years after Jao's death, I was sentenced to manslaughter, with mitigating circumstances due to the circumstances. 6 years in prison with the possibility of progression to semi-open regime after serving 1/3 of the sentence. It was both a victory and a defeat. A victory because they recognized the mitigating circumstances, the history of abuse, and a defeat because I would still be away from Mariana for years. We will appeal, Angelica assured. This sentence is still unfair, considering what you went through. I went back to my cell that day with mixed feelings. I was condemned, yes, but at least I had an end date. I had a horizon, however distant it might be. It was that night, lying on the hard bunk, listening to the night sounds of the prison, that I made another fundamental decision. I would use that time. I would not let the years in prison be just waiting, they would be preparation. I asked to join the program of the prison education system. I started by studying the basics, since I had dropped out of school so early. Soon I was absorbing everything I could, Portuguese, math, history. Sometimes I studied 12 hours a day. I really had nothing else to do. I also joined the work program for sewing, crafts, cleaning. I would accept anything that would reduce my sentence and allow me to save some money. Time passed like that, between books and work. I saw Mariana only twice a year, when Renato brought her for mandatory visits by court order. She grew up before my eyes in leaps and bounds, more and more distant, more strange. At the age of 6 she was already calling me Aunt Jacques instead of Mom. In 1979, after serving a little over 2 years, I was promoted to semi-open regime. I could go out during the day to work, returning to sleep in prison. Sister Conseco, who had never abandoned me in all that time, got me a job in the convent's laundry. It was the first breath of true freedom in years. Walking the streets, feeling the sun, seeing the sea again. Even though I had to go back to my cell at night, it was like being reborn. In 1981, I was paroled. I would be released from prison for good, although I still had to report to the courts regularly. Sister Conseco, an angel that God had placed in my path, offered me a room at the back of the convent in exchange for work in the kitchen and laundry. I left prison one morning in March. I was 30 years old, but I felt as if I had lived a century. My hair was already showing gray strands, my body was marked by the hard life, my eyes carried the weight of everything I had lived, but I was alive and free and determined to recover what was left of my life, especially to recover my daughter. Freedom has a smell, you know? That morning in March 1981, when the prison gates closed behind me, I took a deep breath of the street air. It smelled of the sea, of bread fresh from the oven at the bakery on the corner, of possibility. I was thin, with the first gray hairs at the age of 30 and carrying only a plastic bag with I had only a few clothes. Sister Conseco was waiting for me outside, her immaculate white habit contrasting with my faded gray dress. Without saying anything, she hugged me. It was the first genuine hug I had received in years. "Let's go home," she said. And that word home sounded strange to my ears. I had no home, I had almost nothing, except a fierce determination to get my daughter back. The convent of the Sisters of Charity was in a simple neighborhood on the outskirts of Salvador. An old building with thick walls that kept the interior cool even in the intense heat of the Bahian summer. My room was small, Spartan, a narrow bed, a closet, a small table with a Bible. After a prison cell, it felt like a palace. "You can stay as long as you need," Sister Conseco explained, in exchange for help in the kitchen and laundry. "When you're ready, we'll help you find another place. Establish a routine." I woke up at 5 in the morning with the nuns and helped prepare coffee. Then he would go to the huge laundry room, where he would spend most of the day, among the washing machines and irons. The work was hard, but comforting in its simplicity. At night I studied. The nuns had a small library and encouraged me to continue the education I began in prison. My goal was, of course, I needed financial and emotional stability to have any chance of getting Mariana back. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Renato and his wife Carmen had raised my daughter for almost 7 years now. She was 11 years old and probably saw me as a stranger, maybe even as the bad woman who hurt Grandpa, as they told her. A month after my release, I received the first visit from Angelica, my lawyer. His black power hair seemed even more voluminous, his smile even more determined. I found a way for us to at least have regular visits, she explained, spreading documents out on the convent's kitchen table. They cannot impede the mother's right, even with her parole. We will file a court order. It took 3 months of legal battle. Renato hired expensive lawyers, claiming that I was dangerous, unstable, and that I would traumatize the girl. But the judge, a middle-aged woman with an understanding look, ruled in my favor. He would be entitled to fortnightly visits on Sundays, for now, always supervised by a social worker. The first meeting was in a park in Salvador. Neutral place, they said. I arrived an hour early, too nervous to sit still. I got my best dress, bought at a thrift store with my first savings. I put on lipstick and tied up my hair. I wanted to appear normal, stable, reliable. When I saw Mariana getting out of the car with Renato, my heart almost stopped. She was so grown up, so different from the little girl she remembered. Long hair now, school uniforms instead of the simple little dresses I used to sew. A preteen, no longer a small child. "Hi," she said as she approached, her voice emotionless, her eyes assessing me as if I were a stranger. "Hi, my love, I missed you so much." I made to hug her, but she backed away. Of course I would back down. To her, I was just a woman who showed up twice a year for tense, uncomfortable visits. The social worker, a kind woman in her 40s, suggested we go get ice cream. We sat on a bench, ice creams melting in the heat, talking about superficial subjects, school, friends, the dolls she collected. "Uncle Renato and Aunt Carmen are going to take me to Disney on vacation," she said. A glint of excitement in his eyes. I swallowed hard. I could never give her something like that, not even in my dreams. When visiting hours were over, Mariana hesitated before leaving. For a moment, I thought she was going to hug me, but she just waved and ran back to the car where Renato and Carmen were waiting. Well-dressed, successful couple, perfect for raising a child. Unlike me, an ex-convict working in a convent laundry. I cried the whole way back, but I didn't give up. At the next meeting, I brought a gift, a handmade bracelet that I made in my spare time. On subsequent visits, there was always some little surprise, hair ribbons, homemade sweets, little drawings that she made. Little by little, shyly, she began to open up, to tell me more about her life, her friends at school, the teacher she liked so much. She also began to ask about my life, about why I was in that place. She never said prison. I did something wrong. I explained during our 5th meeting, choosing my words carefully, but it was to protect myself. Sometimes adults make difficult choices. In December 1981, I got permission for the first unsupervised meeting. I took Mariana to the beach, then to an ice cream shop. She was more relaxed, less defensive. He even held my hand as we crossed the street. "Uncle Renato said you killed Grandpa Dal," she suddenly said as she played with the sand on the beach. And truth. I froze. How to respond to this? Lying would be easy, but it would establish our relationship on false foundations. The raw truth would be too traumatic. "Your grandfather was hurting me a lot," I finally replied, "doing things that adults shouldn't do to other adults." I defended myself and he ended up getting seriously hurt. He was bad. He was sick in the head, daughter. Was harmful to the people he was supposed to protect. She was silent, absorbing it in her own way. Then he asked if we could build a sand castle. The conversation was over, at least for now. While I was slowly rebuilding my relationship with Mariana, I was also working to improve my own life. The nuns encouraged me to complete my studies formally. I took a supplementary course at night after long days at the laundry. In 1983, at the age of 32, I obtained my high school diploma. "You are too smart to spend your life doing laundry," said Sister Rosa, the youngest in the convent, who taught at a public school. "Have you ever thought about studying teaching?" "Teaching? Being a teacher?" I had never considered that possibility. In my head, ex-convicts couldn't be teachers with my criminal record. Their parole ends in 2 years. After that, there's nothing stopping them, and we desperately need teachers in the outskirts. The idea was planted like a seed. I started saving every penny. I moved from the convent in 1984 to a small rented room closer to the center, where I could get a better job in an industrial laundry. I earned more, although the work was even more exhausting. When my parole ended in 1986, I had saved enough to enroll in the night school teaching course. I worked during the day, studied at night, and saw Mariana on the weekends. It was exhausting, but every time I picked up a book, every time I learned something new, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. Mariana was 16 now, a full-fledged teenager, with her own opinions and the rebelliousness typical of her age. Our relationship improved a lot. I already saw myself as a mother, although I still lived with Renato and Carmen, who had become her family. It was at this time that the gossip, the looks, the pointing fingers began. That Leah who killed her father-in-law. Salvador was a big city, but somehow my story had leaked out. Maybe someone who recognized me from the time of the trial, maybe someone from the countryside who moved to the capital. The fact is that suddenly I found myself marked again. In the teaching course, some colleagues stopped talking to me. At the laundromat, customers asked for someone else to help them. Even at the neighborhood grocery store I felt the looks, heard the whispers. The shame came back with a vengeance, the feeling of being less than a person, of not deserving a second chance. I thought about giving up, running away again, hiding somewhere else. It was Mariana, ironically, who gave me the strength to stay and face it. "Mom, you are stronger than this," she said when I told her I was thinking about moving to another city. "We have been through much worse. These people don't even really know you. My daughter, so young and already so wise. With your support I kept going." I finished my teaching degree in 1988, at the age of 37. It wasn't easy to find a school that would hire me with my background, even though I had already served my entire sentence. But Sister Rosa, always my guardian angel, managed to get me a place at the community school, where the convent did social work. My first day as a teacher was terrifying. A literacy class, 30 children between the ages of 6 and 8, most from very poor families. Many had never picked up a pencil before, didn't know letters or numbers. Trembling, I introduced myself. "Good morning, children. I'm Teacher Jacqueline." Teacher, the soft, strange, imposing word. I, who had barely had the chance to study at the right age, was now there to teach. The first week was disastrous. I couldn't control the class. I didn't know how to explain things in a way they could understand. I would go home exhausted and crying, but I didn't give up. I remembered Mariana telling me that I was strong and that I would keep going. Over time, I got better. I learned to capture the children's attention with stories, to use their energy instead of trying to contain it, to adapt the teaching to each student's pace. At the end of the first year, when several students were able to read their first words on their own, I felt a joy I never imagined possible. My teacher's salary wasn't much, but combined with my savings from the laundry, in 1990 I was able to rent a larger apartment, living room, bedroom, kitchen, a luxury compared to the cubicles where I had lived. Mariana was 20 years old, studying nursing at university, a scholarship she had obtained thanks to Renato's influence, who knew important people. She spent more time with me now. Sometimes she would sleep at my apartment on the weekends. "Uncle Renato and Aunt Carmen were good to me," she said one of those nights while we were watching television. But I always felt like something was missing. "What?" "You, your story, your strength." I cried, hugging her. My daughter had not only come back into my life, she admired me. After everything I had been through, after all the mistakes, my daughter saw me as an example of strength. In 1992, I received news that would change everything again. Renato had died of a massive heart attack. Carmen, who had no biological children, was devastated. Mariana, now an adult, decided to stay with her for a while to support her in her grief. She had taken care of me for so many years, mother. Now it was my turn to take care of her. My daughter's generosity touched me. No resentment, no hurt from the past, just genuine compassion. It was at this time, with Mariana closer and my teaching career established, that I began to feel a deep need to deal with the ghost that still haunted me. not the physical man. That one was dead and buried by my own hands. But what did he represent? The trauma, the humiliation, the guilt that I still carried. As much as I had rebuilt my life, I still felt dirty inside, forever scarred by what he had done to me and what I had done to him. I decided to seek help. At the time, therapy was not as common as it is today, especially for people from humble backgrounds. But through school I was referred to a support group for women who had been victims of violence. At the first meetings, I couldn't even speak. I could only listen to other women telling stories that were painfully similar to mine. Violent husbands, abusive fathers, harassing bosses, women who, like me, had been silenced, blamed, discredited. For many, justice will never come through the legal system, said the psychologist who coordinated the group. Our justice needs to be internal. Refusing to play the role of permanent victim was a revelation. I still saw myself as a victim. First of Zhao, then of Daltro, then of the system. I still believed, deep down, that my value had been destroyed by them, that I would be forever marked, diminished. In 1994, with the encouragement of the group, I made the decision to write my story. Not to publish it, nor to show it to anyone, just to exorcise the demons. To give voice to the woman who had been silenced for so long, I bought a thick, hardcover notebook and began to record everything. My childhood in Valenka, my marriage to Zhao, Dutro's abuse, my escape, my imprisonment, my reconstruction. I wrote at night after school, often crying so hard that my tears blurred the ink on my pen. It was a painful but healing process. With each page I filled, I felt as if I were draining the poison from my body, as if I could finally choose how that story would be told. Not through the version of the men who hurt me, nor through the system that punished me, but through my own voice. When I finished the notebook, 6 months later, I did something symbolic. I took it to the beach one August morning. Alone on the sand, under the still dark sky, I read each page out loud, as a testimony to the universe. Then I set the notebook on fire and watched the ashes fly over the sea. You no longer have power over me, I said out loud, thinking of Dutro, of Zhao, of everyone who had tried to diminish me. I am free now, and at that moment, for the first time in decades, I truly felt free. The rest of the 1990s was one of stability and growth. I continued teaching, now with enough experience to take on more advanced classes. Mariana graduated in nursing and got a job in a public hospital. In 1997, she gave me the greatest gift of all, my grandson, Gabriel. I want you to be an important part of his life, she said, placing the newborn bundle in my trembling arms. May he grow up knowing his story, his strength. I held that child in reverence, amazed at how life turns around. I, who had been separated from my daughter for so long, now had the chance to be a present grandmother from day one. When Gabriel was 2 years old, Mariana married Antonio, the child's father. A dedicated doctor she met at the hospital, a kind man who treated her with respect. Exactly what I always dreamed of for my daughter. In 2000, at the age of 49, I managed to fulfill another dream. Buy my own house, small, in a simple neighborhood, but completely mine. I paid the down payment with years of savings and financed the rest with a government program. The day I received the keys, I walked through each empty room, feeling an almost indescribable joy. Grandma, is this really your house? Asked Gabriel. Then at 3 years old, running around the empty rooms on moving day. Truly true, my love, no one can take it away from Grandma. In 2005, at the age of 54, I retired from the municipal education system. I didn't want to stop working completely. The idea of having no purpose scared me. I started giving private literacy lessons to adults at home, charging what they could afford, often just in exchange for services or food. It was around this time that I noticed the first significant change in the way the community viewed me. It was no longer the woman who killed her father-in-law, but the teacher Jacqueline, who helps everyone learn to read. People who used to cross the street to avoid passing by me now asked for my help to read important correspondence, to teach their children, to give advice. The redemption that the legal system didn't give me, the community was slowly offering. In 2010, with Gabriel already a teenager, Mariana had her second daughter, Jacqueline Miakara. It was an honor that I never expected to have a granddaughter with my name so that she would grow up as strong as her grandmother, Mariana explained when she told me about her choice. My relationship with my daughter blossomed in ways I never imagined possible after our forced separation. We were not just mother and daughter, we were confidants, friends, and supporters of each other. She never blamed me for the separation, she never threw the choices I made in my face. On the contrary, she always showed admiration for how I faced the consequences and rebuilt my life. "You taught me that we can always start over," she once told me. "No matter how dark the path seems." As I grew older, I began to feel the need to share my story beyond the family circle, not for glory or recognition, but so that other women would know that they were not alone, that there was a way out even from the deepest abysses. In 2015, at the age of 64, I began to participate in conversation circles at community centers, night schools, and support groups. I told my story without romanticizing it, without omitting my mistakes, but also highlighting the strength I discovered in myself. If I managed to survive and rebuild my life after all this, I would say to rooms full of women with looks I recognized well, "You can too." The reactions were varied: tears, hugs, thanks, sometimes distrust or judgment. But each time a woman came up later and whispered, "I went through this too," and I thought I was alone, I knew it had been worth it to expose my scars. In 2018, Gabriel entered law school. He wanted to be a prosecutor, specializing in cases of violence against women. "Because of your story, grandmother," he explained. "I want other women to have the justice you didn't have." That same year, I received a surprising invitation to give a lecture at the UFBA Law School about my experience as a woman in the Brazilian prison system. I, who had barely finished high school, speaking to future judges, prosecutors, lawyers, trembling with nerves but determined, shared not only my personal story, but also the systematic failures I observed. How women victims of violence were discredited, how the system punished those who defended themselves, how prison destroyed instead of rehabilitating. True justice is not only in written laws, I concluded, but in the ability to recognize the full humanity of each person who enters that courtroom. The response was overwhelming. Standing ovations, tears from many students, invitations to speak elsewhere. Suddenly, at 67 years old, I had a new mission, to be a voice for those who had no voice, especially women imprisoned for defending themselves from aggressors. In 2020, when the pandemic forced everyone into isolation, my grandson Gabriel suggested something that would change everything again. "Grandma, why don't you tell your story on the internet? There are a lot of people who need to hear this right now, especially with so many women trapped at home with aggressors." The idea scared me. Internet? I barely knew how to use a cell phone properly, but Gabriel insisted. He bought the simple equipment and taught me the basics. Mariana helped organize the topics, structure the stories in an accessible way. And so the channel Memorias de Vieux Jacques was born, recorded in my simple living room with my granddaughter Jacqueline, often by my side playing while I spoke. We started in April 2020, with no expectations whatsoever. The first video had only 20 views, the second almost 100. The third, where I talked about Daltro's abuse, went viral in a way that none of us expected. More than 100,000 people watched it in 1 week. Messages poured in from women all over Brazil. "Your story saved my life. I watched your video and today I left the house with my children. I thought I was alone until I found your channel. Today, in 2025, I am 74 years old. My channel has more than 500,000 subscribers. I am invited to events, interviews, documentaries, not because I am an expert in anything, nor because I have impressive titles, just because I survived and have the courage to tell. When I think of the 16-year-old girl who met Jao at that Sao Jao party, of the terrified young mother running away with a child in her arms, of the desperate prisoner who tried to take their own life, she seems like another person, and in a way it is only the essence of Jacqueline that remains, the core that survived everything, because I discovered on the hardest path that we are much stronger than we imagine, that we can lose everything, freedom, family, dignity, and still rebuild, still flourish, still find purpose. When young people ask me if I regret it, my answer always surprises. I do not regret what I did to survive. I only regret not having believed in my own worth earlier. This is the real turnaround I achieved against Daltro. I did not just survive what he did. I prospered, despite it all. I transformed poison into medicine, pain into purpose, and this, more than any revenge, is the greatest victory I could have. The years passed like the waters of the river that runs near my house in Feira de Santana, each day, each month, each year, taking me further away from that broken woman who left prison. Today, at 74 years old, I look back and barely recognize that Jacqueline. Suffering shaped who I am, but it did not define me more. After my probation ended in 1986, I was finally able to regain some peace. I had already earned my high school diploma after working so hard at night at the laundry. That's when Sister Rosa gave me the idea that would change everything. "You'd make a great teacher, Jacqueline." At first, I laughed. Who would hire an ex-convict to teach children? But the seed was planted and I began studying for the teaching course. Every penny saved, every hour of sleep sacrificed, was worth it when I walked into that classroom for the first time in 1988 at the age of 37. "Good morning, children. I'm Teacher Jacqueline." The words came out shaky. I, who had barely completed the 4th grade as a child, was now on the other side, with chalk in my hand and 30 children looking at me. Those children from the outskirts of Salvador didn't know it, but they were teaching me more than I was teaching them. They taught me that there's always time to start over. The first few years weren't easy. The salary was minimal, the conditions precarious. I often came home crying, thinking I had done everything wrong. But when I saw a child reading alone for the first time, when I received a poorly drawn drawing with a crooked one for my teacher, there was no amount of money that could pay for it. While I was building my career as a teacher, I was also slowly rebuilding my relationship with Mariana. My daughter, who called me Aunt Jacques, in the first meetings after prison, gradually recovered the word mother. At 16, she was already sleeping at my house on the weekends. At 18, she confided in me that she wanted to study nursing. "I want to take care of people, Mom." "How do you take care of your children at school?" When she got a scholarship to college, thanks to the influence of Renato, who despite everything was a good father to her, I cried all day, not out of sadness, but out of astonishment at how life turns out. My daughter, who had been taken away from me, was now following a path that not even I could have dreamed of. In 1992, Renato's sudden death brought Mariana even closer. She, with such a big heart, insisted on taking care of Carmen during her mourning. I felt no jealousy or resentment. Only gratitude to the woman who helped raise my daughter when I couldn't. The cycle of hurt was finally closing. One night in 1994, after a particularly difficult day at school, I decided it was time to confront my ghosts. I bought a thick notebook at the stationery store and started writing. Page after page, I poured out everything. My humble childhood in Valenca, my relationship with João, the marriage that turned into a nightmare, Dutro's abuse, the fatal night, the escape, the arrest, the reconstruction. I wrote until my fingers hurt, until the tears blurred the ink of my pen. It took me 6 months to fill that notebook. When I finished, I did something that people might find strange. One Sunday morning, I went to the beach alone. I sat on the still dark sand, the sea as my only witness, and read everything out loud. Then I lit a match and burned each page, watching the ashes fly over the waves. "You no longer have power over I am free now," I said to the wind, to the ashes, to the ghosts. "I am free now." And finally, it was true, something changed inside me that morning, as if I had released a weight that I had been carrying for a decade without realizing it. I returned home different, lighter, even the students noticed on Monday. "Teacher, you are prettier today." The following years were of stability. This simple word that meant so much to me. In 1997, Gabriel was born, my first grandson, Mariana's son with Antonio, a doctor she met at the hospital where she worked. Holding that baby in my arms was like holding a miracle. "I want you to be part of his life from the beginning," Mariana said. "He needs to know his grandmother's strength." In 2000, at the age of 49, I fulfilled another dream that seemed impossible. I bought my own house, small, simple, in a quiet neighborhood of Feira de Santana, where we moved in search of a calmer life. Every brick, every tile paid for with my salary as a teacher, saved penny by penny. When I received the keys, I burst into tears. "This house is your real grandmother?" Gabriel asked, running through the empty rooms. Really, my angel, and no one will ever be able to take me away from here." After retiring in 2005, I couldn't sit still. I started giving literacy classes to adults in my living room, charging almost nothing, sometimes just a chicken, a dozen eggs, a cake. Seeing ladies my age learning to write their own names for the first time. There is no salary that can pay for this privilege. It was around this time that I began to notice a change in the way the community viewed me. She was no longer the woman who killed her father-in-law or the ex-convict. Now it was Donna Jacqueline, the teacher. Donna Jacqueline who taught my boy to read. Donna Jacqueline who helps everyone. In 2010, Mariana gave me another gift. My granddaughter who was named after me. Little Jacqueline arrived looking so much like her mother that it was like watching my daughter drink again. But this time I could be present in every moment. Little by little I began to speak more openly about my story. Not to everyone, not as someone who tells gossip, but in contexts where I could help other women, in support groups at church, in conversation circles at the health center, in mothers' meetings at school, without glamorizing, without playing the victim, just telling the naked truth, but also talking about starting over, about rebuilding. If I can rebuild my life after all this, so can you. Said to women with downcast eyes and lines hidden under makeup or long sleeves. In 2018, Gabriel made me even more proud. He entered law school. He wants to be a prosecutor, specializing in cases of violence against women. Is it for you, Grandma? He told me, so that other women don't go through what you went through without someone fighting for them. My grandson grew up listening to my story without beating around the bush, transforming that pain into purpose. That's the true miracle of life. How can we transform even our worst experiences into something that helps others? When the pandemic hit in 2020, I thought it would be the end for an elderly woman like me. I spent months without being able to see my grandchildren, my daughter. The loneliness was heavy, but even that turned into something good. Gabriel taught me how to use a cell phone better, how to make video calls. Suddenly, I could see my grandchildren even from a distance. I could participate in online prayer groups. I could stay connected. Mariana always jokes that I'm more modern than many ladies my age. Isn't that true? I still prefer my notebook to any app. I still like handwritten letters. I still cook on the wood stove when I can. But I've learned that embracing the new doesn't mean abandoning the old. Today, at 74, I'm a different woman from that girl from Valenka, that terrified wife, that a prisoner without hope. My white hair, my wrinkles, my hands marked by time tell my story better than any words. When young people from the community come to me for advice, and they come more than you would imagine, I always say the same thing: life will knock you down many times. The important thing is not how many times you fall, but how many times you get up. If you liked my story, subscribe to this channel, like this video and comment on what you thought of my journey in this little green world. My victory against Daltro was not killing him on that night of despair. My true victory was surviving, rebuilding, flourishing, despite him. It is being able to look in the mirror today and see not a victim, but a survivor. I don't know how much longer I have in this world, but each day is a gift that I use to love my family, to help those I can, to be thankful for this journey, even through the difficult parts, because without them I wouldn't be who I am. As I always say to those who need to hear it, your story doesn't end on your worst days. The last chapter has not yet been written, and as long as there is life, there is the possibility of starting over, of healing, of transformation. 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 Over, of healing,